This incident is over. It began around 6 p.m. in the evening at the Olympia shopping center. Munich police are describing it as a shooting rampage. Police say 10 people are dead, including the gunman who is believed to have shot himself on a side street near the mall. The police aren't certain if he was possibly killed by police gunfire. Investigators say he's an 18-year-old Iranian German with dual nationality who lived in Munich, but we don't know much more about him and no word on a possible motive.
We now are beginning to investigate the personal environment of the suspect for a motive. We are searching his personal sphere for further clues.
Gunman was not on police radar before today's incident. In addition to the deaths, 16 people were injured, including 3 seriously, and we can sadly report that some of the dead and wounded are young children. There were early reports of a second shooting location. Police say, though, that only the immediate area around the shopping mall was their active shooting. There has been a massive response to the shooting. Some 2,300 federal and local police responded, including the elite GSG-9 anti-terror commando unit. Transportation systems, trains, buses, trams were shut down in Munich as the manhunt was underway. Those have since returned to normal operation. We still don't know what the motive may be. We have some video now, though, that we believe shows the beginning of the attack. Take a look at this. This video that appeared on social media shows what appears to be a man in a black t-shirt shooting in front of a McDonald's across the street from the mall. We believe this to be the man who later killed himself after interacting with police. The man appears to be firing a handgun. In the video, we hear about 16 shots, then a pause to possibly reload, then more shots before the video clip ends. Then we see what police say is the same gunman later on a parking garage on the other side of the mall. He paces around and even speaks with the person shooting the video, saying, quote, "I am a German," before firing a few more shots. He was seen by several nearby residents.
I thought I heard several shots, 4 or 5, and screams. At first I didn't react. Then I heard another 4 or 5 shots. Went out to the balcony. I saw someone was running around there on the parking level with a handgun and shouting. Then I heard people screaming and I thought, what's going on? In the meantime, the police and fire and ambulances had arrived and people must have been injured. Then it looked to me like 2 people barricaded themselves on the roof.
There were reports that the gunman had a rifle of some sort, but police say they have no evidence that he used any weapons besides the handgun we see him using in those video clips. Mike, there was a lot of reports that have turned out to be false floating around, eyewitness accounts, notoriously unreliable, but police have to take all of them seriously during an active shooter situation. During the press conference that happened about an hour ago, police said that undercover police officers interacted with him very early in this and fired at him and may have wounded him early in the operation, which may have stopped any bigger plans he may have had. But at this point, we don't know if he was aligned with any groups, what his motives were, and if he had a larger plot in mind.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, Jim, you always say whenever these cases develop that a lot of the information we get initially is wrong, and this was the case too. Talking about long guns, they were talking about maybe 2 or 3 people, and then when they sort it out, it ends up just being one man.
Well, the police, if there's possible witness reports of 3 shooters, that's what they have to look for. They can't assume that it's wrong. They have to go with that. If they believe that the gunman has a rifle based on eyewitness accounts, they have to take that into account when they determine how close they can get to him, what kind of damage he's capable of, what kind of response they need to make. A gunshot that you can make with a rifle from a parking garage roof, much different than with a handgun. This is all technical information, and it may create disinformation in the early parts of an investigation, but it's absolutely the building blocks that police need to use when they're going forward.
Investigators have determined that the Munich gunman was inspired by a 2009 school shooting in Germany. They also said that the gunman began planning this attack a year ago. The 18-year-old German Iranian killed 9 people before killing himself. CCTV's Ira Spitzer is joining us live from Berlin with more on this. Ira?
Thank you, Susan. Well, a disturbing portrait is starting to emerge of the gunman who local media have named as David Ali Sunboli. They're describing, from investigators, a man who spent hours alone in his room playing video games and obsessed with mass shootings, and in fact had paid a visit to the site of the Winnenden mass shootings in 2009 where a gunman killed 15 people. So authorities believe that he had been planning some sort of attack for a year. They're not exactly sure of his motives, but it does seem that he had psychological issues, was being treated for depression at one time. And one of the other things that they're looking at very closely now is how he could have purchased that weapon. Of course, gun control is very strict in Germany, and they believe that he purchased that weapon on something called the dark web. That is an area of the internet that is inaccessible to search engines, where people can browse anonymously. It is also a hotbed of illegal activity. So a German investigator talked a little more about that earlier.
There is chat on the dark web, which points to the fact that he bought the weapon on the dark web. But we are at the beginning of our investigations, and I can only say that it is very probable that he purchased the weapon on the dark web, but there are no further details.
Germany, just earlier tonight, there was another scene of violence when a 21-year-old Syrian asylum seeker killed one woman with a machete and injured two others in the town of Reutlingen. So that is three violent acts in the past week, the Munich shootings, as well as an attack on a train in Bavaria about 6 days ago where 4 people were seriously injured. So a very violent time in Germany right now.
So, Ira, we know that 2 of the attacks were by asylum seekers. This was not motivated, as far as we know, or having anything to do with the refugee crisis. But do you still think there might be a backlash there regardless?
Well, German society, I think it's fair to say, is very divided over the issue of the refugee crisis. Of course, more than 1 million asylum seekers arriving here last year. And while many people have been supportive of that effort, there are certainly elements of society that have grown larger, that have become more concerned about refugees. And certainly when you have the type of news like we had earlier tonight with the Syrian asylum seeker, now that was not a political act, I should say. It seemed as he was having a dispute with this woman. But in any case, people who already harbor these anti-refugee views certainly look at these attacks, and it definitely adds fuel to that fire that is already
It's a desolate
happening
scene.
here in Germany.
Hundreds in mourning while digging a mass grave on the outskirts of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. The burial plots are needed for some of the scores of those killed by Saturday's ISIL suicide attack.
Behind me here is one of the graves, of the many graves being dug here today. So many, in fact, that bulldozers have been brought out to join all the men already who have been here since the morning digging graves.
Many Hazaras, a minority ethnic group in Afghanistan, hold the government responsible for the blasts that struck their peaceful demonstration. They were protesting a major electricity line bypassing their heartland in central Afghanistan.
Government is responsible for that, and that's the best strategy for them and the worst and inhuman way to deceive people and to decrease or to shut the voice of young people.
However, experts take ISIL's claims of more violence seriously, saying the Sunni-backed militant group seeks to divide Islam wherever it strikes. The Hazaras are mostly Shiite Muslims.
Attacking a rally mainly conducted by minority Shiite in Afghanistan certainly is an indication that IS might be involved in it.
Some Shiite leaders say they want their voice heard.
We request the international community to seriously consider the things we demand. We vow we will not stop, even if there is only one of us left alive.
Interreligious violence is rare in Afghanistan, but the fear is these attacks will divide Afghanistan's Muslims.
If there are more attacks specifically targeting the Shiite minority group in Afghanistan, I'm convinced that they will react.
Experts warn sectarian violence might be beyond the capacity of the Afghan government and even the coalition forces in Afghanistan to contain. Catherine James, CCTV.
Anger is boiling in Pakistan over the killing of dozens of people by security forces in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Protesters took to the streets in Islamabad on Sunday to condemn human rights violations committed by Indian troops in disputed territory. Political and religious parties have organized public protest and mobilized people to pressure Islamabad government to go tough on New Delhi.
There is much anger against the brutality of the Indian occupied forces in the Jammu and Kashmir. We want that the Pakistan government and the international community and the organizations and the instruments of the United Nations, they should fulfill their promises to the Kashmiri people, and they should implement their own resolutions.
Islamabad has launched a diplomatic campaign to highlight what it calls brutality of Indian security and paramilitary forces against Kashmiri people.
It is clear manifestation of state-sponsored terrorism to suppress Kashmiri voice of the right of self-determination. The use of lethal force against innocent civilians protesting peacefully or extrajudicial killings is deplorable and constitutes blatant violation of international human rights and humanitarian laws.
Kashmir lies at the heart of a bitter territorial dispute since India and Pakistan's independence in 1947. New Delhi and Islamabad both claim the Himalayan region in full, but rule parts of it. The two neighbors have also fought 3 wars over Kashmir. Javed Rana, Press TV, Islamabad.
The protest rally in the Afghan capital Kabul turned ugly when suicide bombers detonated their explosive bullets as people had joined a protest in the Mazang area. The rally was organized by the minority Hazara community to oppose a government decision to change the route of a key power transmission line to Salang Pass in the north from the central Bamiyan province. Shortly after the attacks, Daesh claimed responsibility. As the injured were being brought in for medical treatment, I met a man outside hospital who was waiting to see an injured relative.
My injured nephew is inside this hospital. The explosions were carried out by the enemies of Afghanistan, and this was not what we expected in response to our protests. Therefore, we strongly condemn it.
Protesters joined a vigil at the site of the twin blasts to remember the victims. They say they will never bow to discrimination. People say changing the route of the transmission line from Afghanistan's central provinces, which are relatively safe and secure, is illogical. They argue that the government's decision to change the route increases security risks in the volatile north. The Hazara minority are mostly Shia Muslims and are thought to be the 3rd largest ethnic group in Afghanistan. The Hazaras complain of persistent discrimination, especially during Taliban rule. Afghanistan's power transmission plan was approved by former President Hamid Karzai. The approval brought happiness and hope to Afghan people, especially in Bamiyan province. But now Afghans are blaming the National Unity Government for overlooking development projects for central Afghanistan. TV.